Article that just came out on August 24th, 2017 in USA Today. Minorities are not responsible for fixing racism in America. Man, I couldn't agree with that title more. We did not create the system of racism, and it is not up to Black people to dismantle it. It is white people's responsibility, period. No one else is responsible for it. They were the one that started this, and they're the only ones that can end it. The burden is all on their shoulders. Let me go ahead and play this video. Okay. All right, let me see if I can refresh it.
I'm here today because my country is very divided, and I'd like to be on the right side of history and make sure that the rest of the world knows that not all of our country feels the way that the white supremacists and Nazis, call them what they are. They're not alt-right, they're Nazis and they're white supremacists, are not the voice of our country. And
I'm here today to let President 45 know that we will not stand by while he condones and encourages white supremacy and violence against innocent people, while he tries to compare what we're doing today with what those thugs and hateful people did. This is what freedom and democracy looks like. It doesn't run people over in a crowd. It doesn't come with torches and weapons and anger and vitriol. And if he doesn't do what is right, then we're going to continue to resist and let him know that we, the people, are not going to stand for it.
I was at home. I was working for most of the day, and I watched the press conference and said, "Get your shoes on, we're leaving." And we came down. We usually have our flag hanging on our wall. And you know what? They can have the Confederate flag, they can have the Nazi flag, they can have the Russian flag for all I care. This one's mine.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is outside of Trump Tower. I knew I recognized that. I actually been down that same street in New York before. For women, it was all too familiar. What women have been challenged to play an active role in preventing and avoiding and eliminating sexual harassment and assault. Change the way you dress, where you go, how you act. If you have a drink or resign, as our president suggested, if you object to being sexually harassed at work, there is an eerie similarity to the questions currently being asked of members of the Trump administration. The responsibility is equally and ill-placed. Okay. Donald Trump's infrastructure press conference was barely revealed display of moral relatism, equating the tactics and goals of neo-Nazi white nationalists and KKK and white supremacists to those gathered to reject anti-American racism and bigotry is beyond the pale of intolerance. Yet the question that immediately started coming up afterwards, albeit in less overt language, was, what are the targets of that racism going to do about it? It's a grotesque question, but it seems to go nearly as unnoticed as the suggestion that sexual harassment and violence is a woman's issue. It is no more the responsibility of minorities to end racism than it is for women to end sexual discrimination and violence. The victims are not responsible for the perpetrator's behavior, including cases of cultural and institutional abuse, such as racism and sexism. The response to Trump's statement should be asked to white Americans. I agree with that. What are you prepared to do? The face of the president's subtle and not so subtle endorsement and the growing boldness of neo Nazi white supremacists and white nationalists to imply that the appropriate action is for a few minority members of the Trump administration to step down is to suggest a win for the hate groups. The people who should be most ashamed to be associated with Trump are white men. They should be disavowing the president and standing up to say, as a white American man, this is not who I am. This is not what I believe. This is not what I will condone or support. And this is not the America that I'm willing to work to create. First of all, Trump is not going to say those words because he doesn't believe those words. That's why we keep hearing the same rhetoric from him. He'll make a statement, and then a few days later, he comes out and say the opposite. He did the same thing in Arizona. Batterers don't abuse their partners because their partners did something wrong. Whites do not join these groups because Jews, African Americans, women, Asians, Latinos, and others have been wronged by them. Neither religious nor ethnic minorities nor women should be held responsible for fixing the problems of racism, fascism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, and all other hate expressed by these groups. This is a grave cultural and character flaw in some whites in America. No, in the majority of whites in America. It's a character flaw. Not all white Americans share these vile views. Most do not know. No, you can tell somebody white wrote this. No, most do, unfortunately. The majority that I run into and see every day do have those feelings. And if they don't say it, they show it in their actions. But believing that this is someone else's problem to solve, or that it's not about you, the abdication of the moral obligation of being an American. These beliefs should be an anathema to anyone who claims to love this country and what it stands for. Every American has a role to play in ending bigotry and hate. However, it is the group to which the perpetrators belong that bear the principal burden of policing and correcting behavior within that group. In this case, it is predominantly white men who are participating online and in person in these vile expressions of intolerance, hate, and aggression. It is white men who have the most power and the greatest responsibility to take a vocal and active stand. With all the privilege that white Americans enjoy, let us also enjoy publicly espousing the virtue of working towards the goal of all people in our country to finally realize America's promise of freedom and equality. Minorities have long since made themselves very clear on these issues. Racism, bigotry, and intolerance are wrong and must end. It is cheap, easy, and not the least bit courageous of our elected officials and leaders to limit their statements to the equivalent of Nazis are bad. Courage, something which many of our leaders seem to be woefully lacking, is taking the personal and professional risk to stand up and call out these dark forces, their leaders and their enablers. We need to stop asking what minorities are going to do about racism and instead ask ourselves if we have reached a point in our nation and politics where good men will do nothing. Well, I see some of them standing up, but it's still not enough, ladies and gentlemen. It's still not enough. And I don't think it ever will be. But one thing I do know for certain, the white race is probably more divided than I've ever seen them, ever, in this country. They're not as unified as you think anymore. They are fighting on opposite sides, and their white privilege is just not what it used to be. Things are changing rapidly in this country. And my prediction is their fighting is going to get worse and even more deadly than just the death of Heather Heyer. But tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family.